Well, thank you for tuning in to this interview. This interview was conducted by Elle, Cruz from Tyndale University in seminary. She is in seminary there and with me, and she did this project for a school assignment, but it proved to be very insightful, and I think you will appreciate the conversation that she has with a co-worker about the situations that are going on in our community and around the world, and the Christian response that we can give at a time like this. So the interview is with Julianne, and the interviewer is Elle. They both work at City Church in Toronto, in Mississauga, and it is particularly very multi-ethnic church, and so they have a lot of wisdom to share. We're going to show a few of the questions that will come up in the conversation, so you know in advance what you will be anticipating to hear. And then you can just reflect after you get through and think about what she says and how that might reinform how you approach the issues that are facing us in even our own community in Canada. Thank you very much. Enjoy the show.
Okay, well, hey friends, I decided to ask my friend Julianne on here just to do a quick interview with me. Like I've kind of prefaced, I decided to change my sermon topic last minute just to kind of address more of the things that we're actually dealing with this week and, you know, kind of what's in the news right now. And so I invited Julianne to come on this Zoom call with me. We're literally just going to have a conversation, and I'll just ask her some questions. And so hopefully we can just, you know, get some insight, be inspired to change and stuff. And so, hi, Julianne.
Hi.
Okay, why don't we just start off easy? Tell us who you are, what you do, how we know each other.
Yes, all the things. Well, hey, everyone. Thanks for letting me into your space right now. My name is Julianne. Again, like Elle said, I have the privilege of working alongside her at the City Church in Mississauga as the Connections Coordinator. And I just do all things connecting with people, with people who are joining our church for the first time. I do a little bit of group stuff, and it's just been such an adventure, such a wild ride. Funny story how I actually came on staff, all because of Elle, and I'm so grateful to her for that opportunity and that long Jeep ride, but that's another story for another day. Anyway, life is good. Life is hard right now, but it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, and whenever I tell stories about our office, I always talk about like the girl at my desk that like will make jokes like, this is her. That's just like putting everything in context. She's the girl, she's my seatmate, she's my office mate. Yeah, we get to do life together, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously I asked you to come on the call just because there's a lot of heavy things happening right now in the news. It's just coming out in the news. It's not like it's just started happening now.
Yeah.
Just wanting to like frame a conversation around it. And, you know, like I said before, just hopefully we can just be inspired to have different kinds of conversations and change things, you know. So maybe we can just start like, how are you feeling with all the stuff coming out like right now in the news, and social media right now is like so like inundated with all this different information and stuff. So like, how are you feeling right now? Kind of
Yeah. It's, you know, it comes in waves, the emotions. Some days are really okay. Some days are very challenging. I won't lie.
Yeah.
But overall, it's been really hard. You know, there's just been a lot of conversation around the value of life and around certain lives over others. And I understand that there is space for all types of contributions to the conversation, but it's been really hard, I think, as a Black woman to see the value of Black lives open and up for deliberation. But at the same time too, I'm hopeful right now, and I'm encouraged because it's been really nice to see a lot of churches really step into the gap this time and make their position on things, I think, super clear. But personally, it's been challenging. I've been battling a lot of people in the DMs. I've been in a lot of arguments the last 10 days. And I don't know if you guys care about Enneagram at all, not putting it on you, not pressuring you, but it has been a very important platform for the way I view and understand people. And if you care to know, I'm an Enneagram 8, so I was built for this. Like, I don't get tired very easily when it comes to arguing and debates on any matter. But I've actually been feeling tired for once. And I think it just speaks to the weight and the heaviness of the matter that we're facing right now, which is the death of George Floyd, of course, and of Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others. So it's been a week of ebbing and flowing, really.
Yeah, and like, I think one thing I felt too is I was really grateful that my like social media timeline was looking different. Like, I think that's a good testament to like, okay, I have friends in my life, I have people in my life that care enough that like we're posting about it. So I was really glad that my social media timeline looked different. But I think at the same time, then you start to see like different opinions that maybe you would just like want to mute a little bit. I too was fighting in the DMs a little bit this week, and just, it is a little bit, the truth is you can't fight everyone on it. And like, here's the other thing, like, I'm trying to enter in conversations where like I'm not angry, so you can actually like have a healthy conversation. But sometimes you just want to be like, you're so dumb. Like, I don't really know another way to like put it.
True.
Yeah, I get that. It has been heavy. I also, I'm going to ask you just some questions, but, specifically, we're talking, all of us in school are church leaders in one way or another. And so that's something like obviously super different than like maybe the social media conversations we're having. And one thing that we always like to do as a group, they've always said like from the beginning, like when we have these like 1 hour times together and stuff like this, it's just like a time for us to come and talk about like our own ministry, where maybe we wouldn't feel safe or comfortable like bringing up issues of our own ministry in like our own church context. You're not gonna be running into the pastor's office every 2 minutes. I can already hear John, one of our classmates, saying amen. But so this is just like, I just wanted to bring up the conversation, hopefully spark some things, just even as our church, with a bunch of church leaders, just to talk about like, how are we gonna respond to it, and how can we, effectively change things like in the church and stuff like that. But as I was kind of praying, I came across the scripture in Isaiah 1:17 says, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause. And I think it's just like such a healthy starting place. Like God has really called us to do that, to be like the hands and feet. And this is just one of the many things that the church needs to address. And it is right now at the forefront. And so I think it's healthy that people are, like you said, like churches are starting to have the conversation and stuff around it. I think one thing I've heard a lot in the conversation is that, racism is different here in Canada than it is in the States. I've even heard the statement as far to say that racism doesn't exist in Canada like it does in the States. And so maybe you can just like respond to that statement and like talk about, is it different? And if it is, how is it different and stuff?
Yeah. And I just want to premise by saying too that I'm not going to have all the answers, and my answers and my responses aren't going to be perfect. Of course, it's going to be framed by my lived experience and my interpretation of things. But I think I've heard a lot of that too, Elle, especially right now in the current climate that we're in, where people really feel as though the outrage coming from Canadians is an outrage we are adopting from the American context, or from Americans, or from Black Americans more specifically. And I would just encourage people, and I would also challenge people to really check where that thought is coming from, because the truth is racism, while it does look different and exists differently and operates differently in the Canadian context, the root of it, the heart posture behind it, is not different in Canada. I think a lot of Canadians are not fully aware of the ugly history of colonization, of violence and oppression of not just Black people and other people of color, but specifically in the Canadian context, Indigenous peoples. And I think that's the biggest marker, is that in the States, we know that it was Blacks that were enslaved for almost, if not a little over 400 years. But in the Canadian context, it was Indigenous peoples that were robbed of their land, stripped of their culture, their language, their identity, and all the other things. And I think we see the repercussions of that even today. But Canadians had slaves. I think that truth has been erased from our textbooks when we go through school, elementary and high school. But Canada had slavery. And I think that, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure, but I just want to leave a little room for doubt or for error, but I'm pretty sure that the reason why slavery wasn't as successful as an economic enterprise in Canada was because of our colder climate. So the crops that they were trying to grow here, like sugar cane and tobacco and cotton, didn't have the climate to support what it was they were trying to grow here. And so they had to reevaluate, well, we're not generating the wealth that, say, our southern counterpart is generating. So we need to rethink what that looks like. And I think Canadians know that Canada can be better on the topic of racism. And I think it is kind of nonsensical. I know that this is coming from a very, very obviously personal and passionate place because of everything going on. But I think Canadians know that we can be better even here at home when it comes to racism. And so that would be, I think, the biggest differentiation if I was to analyze the American context in comparison to the Canadian one, and saying that the root of it is the same. It just manifested differently on who was targeted first. And I mean, I would just encourage everyone watching right now, whether you're a person of color or not, to just ask a friend that is Black, or ask a friend who is a person of color, whether they have experienced racism in any capacity here in Canada. And I think you'd be very surprised to hear not only whether or not they have been impacted by racism specifically, but how many times and in how many ways they've experienced it. And I also think too, Ellen, I don't want to go on a tangent about this. I do want to honor your time and keep it really short. But I think that there is this imagination of Canada being multicultural and diverse, and we are those things, and it's beautiful and it's great, and it's one of the many things I love about Canada. But I think we all need to step out of the GTA for a moment, because sometimes I think we think our proximity is our reality. But if you step into small town Ontario, if you step into certain suburbs in this country, in this province, you will encounter more overt racism than I think people care to realize actually exists here. So let's not go with the false narrative that because buildings are burning right now and people are protesting and rioting in America, that the level of racism is more intense or severe in the American context, because the truth is, it is here in Canada, it is real, it's just way more covert.
Yeah, and that's so true. And like in some ways, it's almost even harder to deal with when it is subtle, when it is in the name of like multiculturalism, the fact that I know enough about your culture that I can make a flippant joke here and there. Sometimes those things are just harder, like it's just harder to address, right? When it's like under the umbrella of like multiculturalism and appreciation for all cultures and stuff like that. Yeah, and I'd also, I think one thing I've been challenging myself to see too is, even if it's not as bad here as it is in the States, that like my heart, your heart still hurt for the people in America and wherever else, you know what I mean? And it's like just because we're like, there's a separation of a border doesn't make it hurt less or like the impact any less. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't be standing up anymore just because there's like 7,000 or whatever kilometers between us. Still like a people thing, right? At the end of the day, a humanity issue. And then, obviously just trying to bring it to the church. You know, watching this is like, there's a bunch of church leaders, like, in what ways have like you felt supported as a Black woman by the church, Big C Church, our church? And then conversely on that, in what ways have you just felt like not seen, not heard, not supported by the Big C Church?
Yeah. I'll start with the ways I've felt unsupported by the church. And I think, I don't want to jump ahead here, but the one thing I think I'll mention on that is, I think for a lot of Christians, they think that silence brings unity. And silence has been, I think, a comfortable space for them on issues of racism, anti-Black racism specifically. And that silence has hurt for a long time. And I know that it wasn't ill-intentioned. I know that people have their reasons for their silence, and it looks different depending on who you talk to. But coming from the other side as a Black woman, not specifically our church, I think, as you said, the church, for a long time and for a lot of years has chosen to step back and step out of issues that are really complex, issues that carry a lot of weight, for, I think, just wanting to stay apolitical. And I respect it, but it's let communities down. I think it's let communities of color down, and I think it's let the Black community down as well, which is why I premised by saying I'm really, really excited and happy about the number of churches that have stepped up and named the evil that is racism. And I really feel like the conversation the church is having right now is only the beginning, and it's going to be a huge shift in the way the church approaches issues of social justice. But in terms of the way I felt supported by the church, I think that for all the churches that I have been able to be a part of, and even our church that we serve at and we attend, has never shied away from diversity, whether that's in our congregation or on our staff or the way we serve our city. It's always been and has always embraced diversity. I think that while in the world I may have encountered systematic, tangible, visceral racism, I'm really grateful to say that I've never experienced that, not only in our church, but in any church. And so I think that for the most part, we've gotten it right. And I think that it's just been beautiful to see the church still be a safe space. And the one thing I'll say too, Elle, is that it's hard because as a Christian, I obviously have friends that are not Christian. And while right now I'm able to have hope and trust in a better world, there are people that don't have that hope. And when they hear, especially now, or see the church, I think it just brings up very hard emotions because the church has been weaponized in a lot of ways against certain communities. And that's why I keep emphasizing the gift that is the church really stepping into the void or the gap right now in this season and making their position very clear. Most churches, I shouldn't say all, most churches stepping in. And that's not a knock to any church. That's not to say any church is better than any other church. It's just from my experience right now, it's been the thing that I think has made me feel very supported. To know that not just our church, the church that we attend, has our back, but that churches are moving in that direction too, to create spaces to make people feel like they can be supported.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think too, like when we talk about having conversations in the church and all that stuff, I think it's important too that it's not just like, I do think it's important, but it can't solely be the focus of like just speaking from the platform. Like it's not just like the preacher, and it's not just like the fancy post on Instagram, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not just the hashtag, but it does have to be like conversations in like small groups and among your leadership teams and all that stuff. It's like that top down, down up, and all around, like, you know, conversation that just needs to happen, you know, for effective change and stuff like that, which is really good. What things do you think like the church can do right now just to respond to what's happening? And obviously just going beyond responding, I think, you know, just even in some of the conversations we've had, our hope is that it's not just a response, but it would be like a catalyst for real change and stuff like that. Right. And so what are, you know, either small, big, practical things that the church can do like right now to respond to what's happening?
I think that this is probably going to be a big statement. I was watching a video actually, and I heard it said that the church needs to reconcile the sins of silence. And I think that's the best starting place, is don't be silent anymore. We can't afford to be silent on these issues. And I know that there is a tension around the intention around posting and what that means, and how do you really know if the person is invested or really committed to changing. But I think that a post for this generation and in this society from a church means everything to people of color, specifically Black people right now. Because I think what's happening right now is, while some of us know that our friends aren't racist and our church leaders aren't racist, there's just so much doubt because people are revealing parts of themselves that have never been revealed before, because we've never been forced to have these difficult conversations. And I think that you'd be surprised to find how many Black people, I'm going to speak for the Black experience right now because I'm a Black woman, but I'll throw in people of color as well, need to be either reminded or reassured of what the church's position is on this. And we cannot take that opportunity to clarify where the church stands for granted. And so that would be my first thing. My second thing is that I think we just want people to sit with us in this pain right now and feel with us. You know, before we can even get to what actions are applicable to the situation or where we can donate and put our money, which I think are all important things, we need to sit with the pain of people and what they're experiencing. I think that empathy is just so low right now. Just like you were kind of mentioning about the border and how we think that geography somehow impacts our compassion and empathy for what's going on over there. One pastor on Instagram said, I can't speak to the diversity of my church without acknowledging the pain of the people. We can't celebrate diversity and never address the disparity. And I think that's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. And I know that not all churches are multicultural or predominantly one race or one thing. And I know that that presents some unique challenges, but we need to do the work on the ground level. And I think on the ground level, it really is connecting with the people who are in pain and just letting them know that you feel with them. Maybe you don't feel what they feel. Maybe you can never feel what they feel. But I would say empathy, just try. Put yourself in their shoes and let that be the thing that shifts your heart posture too. And I love this thought that's been circulating around this idea of repentance, which is to turn away or to change your mind. It's just been, to me, it's so good because we can change our mind about things. And if you're not in a position or a posture to have your mind changed,
yeah, that's good,
on issues that impact the people around you, your brothers and sisters in Christ, then I think you need to sit with yourself for a little bit and think that through and challenge yourself. Because this is not political, this issue of social justice. I think people think it's political and that you got to be on the this side or this side. I would argue that this is actually personal. This is an issue of humanity, and God calls us to love one another, not when it feels good or when it feels comfortable or when it feels right or when you have all the perfect things to say. We're just called to love. And I think that loving your neighbor, which we are your neighbor right now, love us.
Yeah,
I think that's the call for the church right now.
I think too, like, just realizing the power of like small is actually really is a big thing. I think I was like, and I still kind of wrestle with this right now, is like, is my "are you okay" text really enough? Or is like, you know, you can go on Instagram right now and you can see like the, you know, 6 ways to take your, or it'll be like ways you can
6 ways or 10 ways or 40 ways, all the ways,
100 ways to but it'll give like it, like people are giving like, read this, watch this, whatever, watch this on Netflix, listen to this podcast. And I think at first I was struggling with like, does that really matter? Like if I watch, I don't know, When They See Us on Netflix, or what, like listen to that podcast, read that book, like my struggle was always like, does it really matter? And how does like me watching When They See Us on Netflix, how does that impact you? You know what I mean? And then like, yeah, like how does that impact you as a person? Like, how does it impact you if I watch Love is Blind on the weekend or Tiger King? Like, how is that really going to affect you? And that's been something I've been like kind of course, especially me, I want to read all the books. I want to watch all the Netflix shows and stuff, but then struggling with like, or is my effort going to be better used somewhere else to like help serve and come alongside, you know, my friends and all that. So that's just been something I've been wrestling with too. When just like, we obviously have a very unique church. Our church is incredibly diverse. And then I was actually telling our class a couple weeks ago that, yeah, our church is really diverse, but like 30, it's probably even more than that now, 30 to 40% of our population are Nigerian or Ghanaian, and just it's a large Black population at our church. And we're led by a very white male man who just, I don't know how he does it, but he loves us so well. But that's just like so unique to our church. And I know that so many of the of other churches just aren't, like, that's just not a reality for them. Like multiculturalism isn't a reality for them in their churches. And so like, and this might just be hard for you to answer because it might not be your experience, but what do you think like people in churches that are either not multicultural at all, or like oh my goodness, we're currently helping that like Chinese Baptist church down the street from us, like that might be like centric to one culture. Even my brother's helping like a Filipino Baptist church. Like how are we, or how can like the conversation around how much more important is it, or how do we even like start to bridge that gap in communities that look that way?
Sorry, so I just want to clarify. You're asking whether you're asking how can communities who are not as multicultural or diverse help other communities or respond in love to other communities that maybe don't look like them.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. I'm gonna like add to that. You totally have that right, but it's also like I have friends through no fault of their own necessarily, like don't necessarily have like Black friends, and it's like not as close to them as they are. You know, maybe the city they grew up in is like super white or something like that. You know what I mean? So like for me, and then obviously for you, it's super close to home. Like it's really hard for me not to address it because my friends and like people I really respect are people of color. Our church that we love on is full of people of color. So it's really close to home for us. But if your sphere is not, or does not include as many people of color, whether it's church community or where you live community, like how, like, how can people start to bridge the gap? Let's say someone's timeline isn't looking different right now.
Right.
How do you begin to like create change in that?
Yeah, I think that there is a level of individual responsibility. One of the things that we've been seeing a lot on social media right now is what it looks like to be an ally and what allyship looks like, specifically to the Black community, but more broadly to people of color. And so I would just encourage people, and this isn't on an individual level before I get to the church, but diversify your friend circles, your friendship circles. This is where research, reading and listening, all the things, all the ways. Here's where it really becomes important, because just bringing it back, and this is just, again, what I think and what I believe, but I think that God created diversity.
Right.
I think he created culture. And I think that he wanted us to, I think he didn't want us to be separated by that, is what I'm trying to say. I think he wanted us to learn about the vast tapestry that is all the races and all the cultures. And so this is not to shame anyone. This is not to knock anyone down. If your friendship circle or your church mostly looks like one race or ethnicity, I mean, I think there's beauty in that still, but I would encourage you to, on an individual level, try to be a little more intentional with bringing other people who don't look like you, who don't sound like you, because it's bigger than race, actually. I think differences bring unique perspectives, and God calls us to be the light of the world. And I think that, and this is true too, I think that we often think of light as like missions and like, go be a light, go share the gospel. But light is knowledge.
It's good.
And we're supposed to share knowledge so that we can eradicate to the best of our abilities ignorance. And I think that when we are only in a think tank of people that look like us and sound like us and smell like us and do what we want to do, and this goes across the board, this is for everyone, it can be dangerous because it doesn't embrace the beauty and the diversity that God intentionally created. And so no community is absolved of the responsibility of trying to diversify either their congregation or their friendship circle. So that's my one side of it. And then I think too, on a more communal level, in terms of reaching communities that don't look like you, or trying to create space in your community where maybe a lot of people don't look like you, I really think it goes back to the heart posture. I think it goes back to really seeing everyone, regardless of race, as a son or daughter of Christ, and being in a position to create or make space for that in your church. And so I know I am African, I am Ghanaian. I grew up in a Ghanaian church before I attended the city church. And there are some cultural practices, there are some traditions that we hold on to because we want to preserve and protect our culture while worshiping, praying, hearing a message. But when I reflect, when I look back at some of the practices, and I can say this because I'm Ghanaian, okay? I can see how some of it can be exclusionary.
Yeah, that's good.
To someone else who isn't Ghanaian, who walked into our church building. And so what is the heart behind what we're trying to do in our services? What is the heart behind what we're trying to do when we meet together? Again, is it to make us feel comfortable, or are our doors really open to that person who's far from Christ, no matter what they look like, no matter what background they come from, no matter what their ethnicity is? Can they walk in and feel like they belong? And if the answer to that is no, then we need to do that work, both on an individual level and collectively with our lead teams, with our staff teams, on our pastoral teams, whatever capacity you serve at your church, there needs to be conversations happening right now to start creating spaces for inclusivity at the church. Because the last thing I think anyone wants, as a Christian especially, is for someone to come into your building or come into your space and say, I don't feel like I belong. Yes. And I think that is a unifying thought that should motivate us all, regardless of nation, race, creed, to understand that we need to do better with making sure that people feel welcomed, safe, and at home. I don't know if that makes sense, honestly.
That's so good. No, that's so good. I think too, we were talking about like the importance of visual representation. Also, I think it was last summer, Julianne and I were on a panel of 5, and we kind of got voluntold to speak to, like, we had to preach.
Well, Elle is such a natural at it, isn't she, guys?
Stop.
She's so good.
I'm gonna edit that part out right now. Yeah, so we got voluntold. We had to do like a 5 for 5 or whatever. And I remember though, after, one of our friends had messaged another one of our friends just saying how important it was actually to see you, not to toot your own horn, but I'll do it for you, like to see like a woman of color up on the stage. And so like there's like a positive side of that, like, yes, visual representation. Obviously, like I said, we have a white pastor, so to have like literally the complete opposite, like a Black woman up there speaking was so healthy for a church. But then I think also on the other side, sometimes you and I have gone to other churches or like other church conferences. I'm just gonna like completely expose this right now. And like sometimes
expose it, girl.
We'll see like you know, like the token Black person up there, or like a video, it's like the Black friend like appeared in the video or something, and you and I will always make comments like diversity check, like, just make sure we included, the person that looks different. And I think there's it's such an easy trap that maybe comes out of a good place, but then it kind of turns into like tokenism, like let's just throw up the Black girl up there. Even like, let's throw in the old person, so we're including all generations or something, know? Like how can the church kind of avoid like that idea of like tokenism? And then while still maintaining that, like, hey, we really do want to represent generations. Can you hear what is happening in my house? I
can kind of hear.
Okay.
I can kind of hear.
I'm living through construction. How can we avoid like tokenism? While still trying to, maintain diversifying our stages, our platforms, volunteer teams, like whatever it is.
Yeah. Whew, that's a heavy one. It's a hard one. And I know people do their best, but it's so true. You and I have definitely discussed it before, where you just can't help. And this goes beyond the church, actually. Like, and I know you would agree with this, Elle, that in any conference, most times it's a predominantly white male panel. Maybe there's 1 or 2 women, maybe there's 1 person of color, maybe they're Black, and it's, as a church, I think we can do better on this front. And I see it happening. I have to be honest, I see it happening, but I think if I was to talk to the conference head of a certain conference, I'm not thinking of one in particular, just this is a total hypothetical. If I could have a conversation with a conference director who is working really hard to put together a panel, I think what happens sometimes, I think a number of things happen. I think one, often who's most popular tends to be people of one gender and race.
Sure.
And so the way it falls is that these are the people that we are going to put on our platform because they already have that pedigree and people recognize them. And I know that the intention is not malicious. I'm certainly not suggesting that that person who puts an all male, all white panel together is racist. It's not what I'm saying. But I think, and it just keeps circling back to that individual work we have to do with our heart posture and seeing people the way God sees them. And thinking about, okay, when I put on a conference and I'm on I'm on the stage and I'm looking out at the audience, who do I see there?
Right.
that's the place we need to start. I'm trying to rein it in, Elle, because I don't want to go off. I don't want to go on a tangent.
Do it.
But we need to see the beauty in diversity, and that needs to be the guiding compass on the way we build events that are supposed to cater to everyone.
Yeah, that's good.
And so let's not make people of color on panels, or let's not make people of color on teams that are on a platform, right, or on leadership an afterthought, or a box to check on our list.
Yeah.
I think that there's honesty and there's beauty in, before you even come up with names or a list, in making setting a standard to say, regardless of who's popular, who's this or who's that, this is the kind of racial diversity we want to see on this.
Yeah, it's so good.
On this conference, or on this stage, or in this house. Starting there, and then plugging people in that way, because I think what often happens is people kind of throw things together and they look at it after and they're like, oh shoot, we don't have this or this or this or this or that or that. And okay, let's just add, let's just throw them on at the end.
Yeah.
And then we kind of become the period, as opposed to, I don't know, the first letter in the sentence, or the adjective. Let's use the diversity of all people of color to decorate whatever it is we're trying to do, not as ornaments or as objects, but to bring again, the variety of perspectives, the uniqueness of our experiences, the different thought processes, all of those things. And let's make that the standard, that the diversity, not only on our panel, not only on our stage, not only in our conference, but in the way that certain talks are delivered, in the way that certain songs are sung, in the way that different jokes are told. It's all different, but we all can embrace that difference, because that's what makes us beautiful. Again, it's that vast tapestry. It's like the mosaic. I can't escape that image in my head of all the different broken pieces of colored glass coming together to make this brand new, beautiful image.
So good.
We can have that if we work at it. And it doesn't come naturally, not to everyone, and that's okay. I was going to say, that's why some organizations literally have to hire certain people on their PR and communications teams to be like, hey, there's something here that you're not seeing right now, and we need to correct that. And I think it's good and healthy for churches to adopt that same practice, because it takes work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I also messaged our class and I asked them to throw some questions out. Okay, so I have two of these can kind of come together. So 2 or 3 more questions, and then
okay.
Okay, I'm gonna stick with the church one first. Sorry, I'm reading through them right now.
Okay, no problem.
What are the best ways to hold space for people of color in our churches?
Yeah,
it's a big one though.
That's such a good question. I think holding space looks like legitimizing our experiences. And I think it looks like oh, that's a heavy one. Honestly, a few different responses came to mind. I think it definitely starts with legitimizing our experiences, but listening to them without interrupting and without asserting your butt.
Yeah.
And I think that's my personal experience right now. Is I've been trying to have conversations with people both in church and out of church. Not our church, just people who I know are Christian. And there's just been a lot of buts. And honestly, I've never been more irritated at the word, because how can you empathize with me if you're butting everything I'm saying to you right now?
That's so good.
How are you coming in to understand what I'm experiencing if all you're looking to do is argue your perspective? And I get it, there's space for your perspective, but if you can't listen to an experience that sounds different from your own, I've heard it put this way: just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
And so allow me to exist in this space without butting me out.
Yeah, it's so good.
You know, just allow me to share with you what I've gone through. And just circling back to what I've said, because I think this is the biggest thing that I think is missing, but I think is so crucial in moving us forward. Empathize with that.
Yeah.
Feel it with me. Sit with me. You know, be on my side. The biggest question right now that's being asked is, what side of history do you want to be on? 10, 15, 20 years from now, 2020 is going to be in the history books.
Yeah.
From COVID-19 to
all the craziness.
I was going to say a cultural reference. I'm sure a lot of people won't understand. But to this.
Yeah.
And where will you stand? Will you stand with us?
Yeah, it's good.
In unity? Even if there are some things that we won't agree on 100%, will you stand with me and humanity? I think that's the biggest thing in creating space. And then I think more literally, like I said before, create space for someone like me in your life. Yeah. Am I represented in your world right now? Not just someone you follow on Instagram or on Facebook, or someone you see at church, or someone you might sit next to in the classroom. On a personal level, do I exist in your world? Do I have space in your world? Do we have space in your world? And in what ways are you maintaining that space to possibly get bigger? Because, you know, sometimes you hear people say, I have like one Black friend, or I have a Black friend and he's or she's never experienced. It's like,
right.
Before I even get to the hasn't experienced, I'm like, one?
Yeah.
There are a lot of us and you have one?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and not just Black, other people of color, because it really does enrich your experience to hear, to live with, to take up space with people who don't look like you. And I feel like those two right there are really heavy. Easy to say, but it's even harder to live out when your circle doesn't have space for people of color.
Yeah.
When your circle doesn't have space for Black people.
Sure.
When maybe your church doesn't have space for people of color or for Black people. Yeah. Because the conversation right now is racism on a broader level. But if you really narrow it down, the real conversation happening right now, I think across the country and in a lot of places around the world, is specifically anti-Black racism.
Yeah.
And yeah, I could go on, but I'll leave it there. I hope that answers the question. No, I don't know. I'm not good at this stuff.
I even think just like the just like sit with me part, like that is just, it is so good. And it is one of those things that seems so small. And I think it frees people up from, like, I don't need to necessarily offer you a solution. Like I can't rewrite years and years and years and years and years of history. And I'm, you know, technically not like a policymaker, and I myself can't go in and just, you know, change all the systems and stuff like that. But what I can do is like sit with you. What I can't do is hug you post COVID. What I can is like, you know what I mean? Like, I think Pastor Jeremy Rollins from I-5 City in the States, he wrote just like help hold up my hands right now. You know what I mean? Yeah. And help me to breathe right now. And I think that it's so powerful. It seems so small and maybe cheesy in a way, but that's really good. Okay, maybe these two are kind of, I think the thought is the same. So one question is, how do or should white people love authentically without engaging in or being motivated by white guilt? That was one question. And then I'm pretty sure that this is like same thought. How do I love without indirectly still giving off the sense of being privileged?
How do I love without being motivated by white guilt? And how do I love without being privileged?
Without giving off the sense of still being privileged.
Without giving off the sense. Okay. Whew, okay. Guys, I love you. I don't know you, but I love you. This might come off hurtful, but it's not my intent. It's my Enneagram 8. I don't think that you can ever avoid giving off the sense of being privileged.
That's good.
The privilege is very evident to us in the skin that you wear, so you can't avoid it. So just speaking to that second question, and I appreciate where you were coming from with that question. I think I know what you're trying to say, which is
like arrogance. I think that like not wanting to come across like superior,
arrogantly or coming off hierarchical, where it's like, I'm above you, the white savior complex, let me swoop in and save the day. I get it. I think that right now, one of the narratives that I see is people thinking that white people have to apologize for their whiteness, or feel guilty for what white people did in the past, whether it be slavery or segregation, sterilization, prison, the prison pipeline, all of those things, right? And I just want to be super clear about, and I say it with all the love in the world, we don't need your white tears, and we don't want your white guilt. We don't want or need any of those things. What we want from you, I think, is, Dr. Anita Phillips said it best. She said, for Black people, acts of service, action is our love language.
So good.
And so while I appreciate the self-work that's happening from a lot of people right now in terms of realizing maybe how they benefit or exist within systems of privilege that oppress other people groups, one of the things I've loved seeing on Instagram, and that's our world right now, because what is life? We're all at home on our phones. Is seeing people just acknowledge the ways they have maybe benefited from systemic racism, and just coming up with actionable steps that they can take personally to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And that's whether it be challenging family members that have said explicitly racist things, or educating their kids with current news events, maybe finding some articles that are appropriate enough for your children to kind of sit with them and be like, can you read this article out to me and tell me what's going on? And then talking through it with them, diversifying their books and their television shows. But yeah, I don't want white guilt. And I'm using that as the term that is. I don't want that to be the motivator, because it's not healthy. And I don't think it's overall beneficial. And I know that there are some that would disagree with that. And as well, I don't want white people in particular to worry about coming off as arrogant or superior. Here's what I want. And this thought just dropped in my head, is it's this whole journey of reconciliation. I heard this beautiful image of like both sides, whether Black, white, brown, Asian, whatever. We're all meeting in the middle to find common ground, and then we're going to look up together to find that unity, to find that wholeness. But I think that what I need from white people, and I've been seeing this a lot, is be open to critique and don't get defensive about it. Because there's going to be a lot of people who are in a lot of pain, that have a lot of things to say about what you say. And I know there's been a lot of fear about, well, I want to say this, but I don't know if I can say that because I don't know if it's offensive, and I want to reach out to this friend, but then I heard I'm not supposed to put it on Black people to answer these questions. And there's all of that stuff, which I think is completely ridiculous, if I'm being honest. All the people in my life know they can come to me with questions, and I'm more than ready to do my best to answer them. But I think just be open to that pain. I think Worry less about, and I'm not saying this is what white people are doing, and I'm not saying that this is the intention behind the question, but worry less about having to perform your remorse.
Ooh.
And worry more about increasing your capacity to accept the pain of those who you will be interacting with if you sincerely want to change.
Yeah.
If you sincerely want to diversify. That for me, I think, is going to be the biggest challenge.
So good, Ju.
And it's a hard thing to answer, really. It's heavy, it's hard, and it looks different for everyone. For some white people, that might come a little more naturally. They may know how to navigate that with a little more courage and confidence. But really, that's what it takes. It takes courage to step outside of your comfort. And I think that's another thing too, is to step out and be like, I'm not going to have the right words. I'm not going to have the right phrases. I'm not going to have that trendy quote that nails right on the head what you're feeling and crucifies me at the same time without coming off as an enemy. But I'm open to your feedback. I'm open to your constructive criticism, because the end goal, the destination that I want to arrive at, is not perfection, but continued support to walk alongside you as we journey through this very difficult thing, because I recognize how I benefit from it. I recognize what my contributions through it have done to other people, and I never want to go back to that place. That is the aftermath of true, genuine repentance, I think. Yeah. And it's a process. You'll slip up, and that's okay. We have to forgive each other. We have to forgive one another. No one is more superior than anyone. I think people think that what we want is superiority or to be better than. So that's like the whole all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter thing. It's like, you're not better than this, and then vice versa. But I think it's really just a protest and an outcry for equality. Yeah. What we're saying is we're not being treated the same.
Yeah, it's good.
We don't want to be better. We just want to be the same as you. And so how are you taking steps to work on creating spaces of sameness for people who don't look like you? And building up the stamina and the strength to endure when the weight of that gets super heavy.
Yeah,
it's a long-winded circular answer. It's not perfect, but it's the best I've got, I think.
No, that's good. That's really good. And I think too, like for me, Enneagram 3 coming out, like I always like to be like the best at everything. My gosh. And I think for me, I'm just like, I have to be okay that like I probably will end up saying the wrong thing at some point, and like I will get corrected, and like that's just okay. And it's probably gonna sting so bad because my personality hates that. It's so bad that I didn't get corrected. But to also be like, yeah, you know what, that's okay. Like I don't have to be, there's no way I can be the best at this. And learning, and then obviously just giving grace for all the different types of conversations that are happening. Even today, we're recording this on Blackout Tuesday, and there's some people that are like, yes, Blackout Tuesday, and then some people are like, how dare you silence me, and don't post a square, and how dare you not post a square, and you're like, yeah, do I post the square or not?
I know. Yeah, it's so hard, right? And it's like it's hard because you really will never find the right time to post the right thing to please the right people. There's just no way. I think there are people out there who are just waiting, like they're just on the prowl, waiting for someone to make a mistake to call them out.
Sure.
And I think one thing we need to understand is that anger manifests itself differently in different people. And so there are some people who are processing this anger in a super healthy way. You know, I think conversations with God, like prayer, going to scripture as Christians. But for those who are not believers, well, I know this sounds very fluffy, but where is their hope?
Totally.
Where is their peace? And I think that for some of them, numbing the pain manifests itself through a very ugly anger that looks to attack. And honestly, I really feel like everything that's happening in our world right now is spiritual.
Sure.
Don't even let me take you there. But, we got to understand what we're facing and what we're fighting right now, which really isn't each other.
Preach.
But I'll let you guys process that.
Yeah, you know what else is so good? I just think too, like, I have found comfort in, like, God obviously is like, he's after our heart, quoting David and my favorite. He's looking after our heart. And so I think if your heart is to serve well, love well, change, be in a conversation, even if you mess up, even if it's the wrong thing, like all of those things that everyone is so worried about, I think God will grace. And I think people will grace, I think, a little bit more than we think they will.
Yeah.
God, especially, I think God is gracing the wrong statement, when you're engaging in conversation. And so, yeah, while someone might get mad, you have no idea, like, your wrong thing just might open up a really cool conversation on the other side. I believe, like, God's grace has to be all over that. He has no choice to honor, like, your heart posture. But I have one last question for you.
Let's go. Do it.
I haven't vetted this, so, like, I just don't know if it's going to be a heavy hitter. Ready?
Okay.
Where do so-called Christians get the idea to be racist towards people of color if this is not taught in the church? And it's probably referencing some Old Testament scriptures, and they have been brought up with the Bible. So where do Christians get the idea to be racist towards people of color?
Okay. Whew, okay.
Heavy.
I'm going to do my best.
That one's from Kate.
Thank you for your question, Kate. I feel like we're on the talk show.
Yeah.
Racism is sin.
That's good.
And I think we all can agree that we were all born sinners. And so I think that for a lot of us, there was a natural bend toward racism before we even knew what it was. And that's on a spiritual level. But I think that in the world, racism became systematized through the economic enterprise that was slavery, and still is in some regions of the world.
Right.
But when we talk about the transatlantic slave trade to America, I think that birthed the foreground for which we have come to understand racism, specifically anti-Black racism. And so when a thing becomes systematized, it lives and breathes in all the tenets of society that comes to order and structure the way we live in our world, whether that's through the legal system, whether that's through the economy, whether that's through the health care system, whether that's through education, whether that's through policing and criminalization, whether that's through home ownership, business ownership, whatever.
And then generations and generations and generations and generations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that we think that when a thing looks different, so for example, slavery ends, and this is just my long-winded, I'm just trying to set context here for a moment.
Yeah.
We think slavery ends, so we thought racism ended, but then we had segregation.
Sure.
And then we think segregation ends, so racism ends. But then we had the forced sterilization of Black women. Then we had the over-criminalization of Black people through the drug war. Then the war on crime. It just has manifested itself in so many different ways that have become less and less tangible because it's become more and more covert.
Yeah, that's good.
And so that's the context. Now, going back to what you just said, Elle, about generations.
Yeah.
Digesting and ingesting racism systemically, more covertly, and also very overtly through uses of the N-word or through certain parameters we put on our kids, like you can't date a Black person, or through the education system again, where we had Black schools, white schools, they were forced to come together, then birth private schools where wealthy white kids could, and so people make up systems. Now, this is my ideological perspective. Some people will disagree and think systems make people. I think there is an argument for that, but I think people create systems. That's how we function. That's why we have people who are systems oriented. They can think of processes and procedures. And in the same way that we use those kind of processes to organize our church, to organize our services, to structure our day, there were people whose heart was bent towards racism and who embraced that and accepted that thing and built systems around it that we are still experiencing today. Those people who were building those systems had children, who had children, who had children, who had children, who had children, and here we are, right? And so it's a very hard thing to track and trace because it really has permeated every facet of society down to the individual and then back up again.
Yeah.
And so there's a really great talk that a guy named Darius Daniels, he's a pastor, did about racism being not just a heart posture issue, not just an evil, not just a sin, but a gospel issue. And he just does a brilliant job, and I won't attempt to redo what he did there. So I just encourage you guys to check it out. Darius Daniels, This Is a Gospel Issue. It's on his IGTV. But he says the hermeneutics, the way in which people with different perspectives, specifically on the issue of racism, can go to the same Bible and find scripture to confirm their bias, to confirm their sin, to confirm their racism, and go back out into the world again, kind of speaks to the level and the levels of the issue that we are experiencing. Now, let me get a little controversial. Let me get a little radical just for a second. I'll bring it right back. We have to understand that globally, there are a lot of people who are church hurt because the Bible and Christianity has been weaponized to hurt large groups of people, from indigenous peoples through colonization down to Black people in the American context and here in Canada as well, where parts of the Bible were either torn out or blacked out. Anything that talked about freedom, individuality, anything that had to do with subject matters like that were intentionally erased. And I encourage you guys again to check out the Slave Bible. In an attempt to keep Black people oppressed and enslaved. And what were they reading out of that Bible? Respect and obey your masters.
Yeah.
You know, respect and obey your authority figures. And I'm losing my point. Let me get it back. So there's a very ugly history the church has with racism that tracks back decades, if not centuries.
Sure.
And we have to remember that people were in those churches. You know, T.D. Jakes did this talk with Carl Lentz, and I'm referring all the pastors. And if you don't agree with them or if you don't love them, I apologize. It's just what I've been watching and my journey of trying to process everything that's happening. And T.D. Jakes talks about going back to Ghana, which is where I'm from, Cape Coast, where there are still buildings that housed slaves stacked up on top of each other one by one, in there, where their nails were crawling on the walls trying to escape, where the person at the top would urinate and it would trickle down the bodies. Over 400 years later, the stench is still entrenched in those buildings. But what was most shocking about what he was saying was right above where they kept the slaves before they were transported in ships was a church.
Wow.
Darius Daniels, going back to his talk on This Is a Gospel Issue, read this great prayer about the sovereignty of God and his love for people. That was an excerpt from a KKK meeting, their prayer opening up their clan session or their whatever.
Gathering.
And so they're gathering. And so we've got to remember that racists and non-racists alike can go to the Bible and walk away either changed or unchanged because of the heart posture.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, I'm really not trying to get like super deep into this, and I apologize, but there's this part in Exodus that's always like, not troubled me, but kept me thinking about, and God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And I'm like, why is God doing this? Why is he hardening Pharaoh's heart?
Sure.
And I just saw like a little thing online where someone asked, why did God harden Pharaoh's heart when Moses was trying to get the people of Israel freed? And the person responded by saying, because Pharaoh wanted God to harden his heart.
Oof, that's good.
And I immediately was just taken aback, because I was thinking, why have I been blaming God for hardening Pharaoh's heart when
that's what he's been seeking? Yeah.
Right. And I think that level of intuition, of self-awareness, to say, what parts of my heart am I keeping hard right now? Specifically from the racist perspective, or speaking to the racist, what part of my heart, like they can't get to that place. They don't know that their heart is hard.
Yeah, that's so good, Ju.
They don't know. And so absolutely, a KKK member, an extremist conservative or Republican, an extremist left-wing liberal socialist Democrat, Ellen, I, you,
yeah,
wherever we fall,
yeah,
can all look in the Bible, and if we're not careful, become so arrogant and complacent that we are not getting the revelation that comes from engaging with Scripture with our heart fully open to the transformational work that comes from doing it with honesty and integrity, and honestly with transparency. And so anyway, that's my long-winded answer, but racism is a sin issue.
Yeah, that's good.
It was then systematized by people. And when I say people had kids and they had kids and generations have gone by, it got birthed in homes that was then entrenched and ingested by people who uphold these systems.
Yeah.
That put value on these systems, who benefit from these systems, and who don't want to lose anything.
Sure.
If these systems are taken away from them, they don't want anything. They don't want it to cost them something.
Right.
Similar to how I think people who go to the Bible or to the Word and aren't looking for that active transformation aren't looking for anything to change because they don't want to pay the price for their limited thinking or their limited perspective. And so it's not a nuanced answer. I mean, we could spend the rest of the day trying to talk that through. That's just my perspective on it. I think it's rooted in us. I think it's rooted in the world. And I think it requires true repentance.
Yeah.
And not arrogance to say, I'm not racist, so this isn't my problem.
Sure.
Yeah,
that's really good. And like, even what you're saying, just being able to go back to the Bible and not let it change you. I just read, like, I came across a quote that was like, if you're always reading the Bible and the Bible never contradicts your thoughts, like, you're not reading it properly. And yeah,
so good.
Praying for like holy conviction from God, like, what parts of my life, of my thoughts, of my ways, of my behaviors, like, do you need to change and weed out and like transform me? Like, coming with that open heart, I think, is super healthy. And then, you know, I think my mom and I had this conversation too just the other day, but I need to like find the scriptures, but there are people that are referencing the Old Testament as like basis for racism and stuff. And this is what I'll say too, like, yes, for sure there was already like racism occurring in Bible times, like between like you can read that Samaritans, between Jews, Gentiles, blah blah blah, all that stuff. But then Jesus,
right?
And at the end of the day, Jesus was like the great equalizer. You know what I mean? Like,
yes, so good.
So it's like, if you're, go ahead, like, go get that Old Testament scripture all you want. You can quote it all you want, but like, you don't understand like what happened after. It's like Jesus, but Jesus came and like, he's the great equalizer on things. I think there's danger in all of that. You can like read all the things that are like in Numbers of what not to eat, or in Leviticus and stuff like that, and you could have the exact same argument, and then at the end of the day it's still, but Jesus came and then he changed all of that. I think it's really important to like remember that in the conversation when it comes to Bible and all of the deep stuff that comes with that.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was all the questions. Any final thoughts?
I guess I would want to say really quickly that despite the heaviness of our world, and honestly, it took me 10 days to get here. So I don't say it in a vacuum. It was a process.
Yeah.
There was moments where I knew I was supposed to go to God with this anger, and I intentionally didn't because I didn't want to be convicted to think through it and let it go. And then there finally came a breaking point where I did. And honestly, God is still good, even in all of this.
Yeah.
And it's a truth that's hard to hold on to right now when it feels like your life is not valued in the same way as other people. But I'm hopeful. And I think a lot of people are, and that's why they're fighting. Because you don't fight for things you don't hope with, you don't hope in,
Yeah, that's
or you don't hope for. And so, yeah, I'll just say that I'm still encouraged. I'm still hopeful. I'm still grateful, and I'm still joy filled. And I'm just expectant for what's going to come out of this on the other side. I think we will be better for it, both as people and as the church as well.
Yeah. 100%. So good. Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me. And
thank you for having me.
I love it. Thank you so much. Seriously, so good.